The first signs of contrast appear long before any deeper understanding forms, carried in the quiet routines that shape everyday life. What stands out most is not a single dramatic moment, but an atmosphere and unmistakable sense that safety in Australia is woven into the rhythm of the culture rather than enforced through visible vigilance. Streets feel slower, public spaces calmer, and daily interactions unfold with an ease that many Americans find almost disorienting. The absence of tension becomes its own kind of presence, a background note that reshapes expectations from the very beginning. What captures attention first is the visible lack of intensity around security. Playgrounds without towering fences, suburban homes with windows left open, and coastal paths where children roam with minimal supervision all form a landscape that can feel strangely unguarded. Yet this openness does not arise from neglect. It is a reflection of trust, a cultural current that changes the emotional temperature of public life. Americans often register this as an unexpected quietness, a slower heartbeat in the environment. As if the country operates at a more measured pace, deeper differences begin to emerge when examining how safety is understood and maintained. In Australia, the collective expectation leans heavily towards shared responsibility. Neighbourhoods operate with a quiet community vigilance, not through suspicion but through presence. Social norms encourage looking out for others, offering help without hesitation, and assuming goodwill unless proven otherwise. The result is an emotional climate that feels less defensive and more cooperative. Public policies reinforce this mindset. Strict regulations around alcohol consumption, rigorous road safety standards, and an unwavering cultural stance on issues like firearms collectively shape a society that prioritizes prevention over reaction. General patterns become clear in everyday interactions. It is common to see drivers stopping far in advance for pedestrians, or strangers casually leaving belongings unattended at cafes without worrying. Children play in wide, open parks designed with thoughtful safety standards rather than fear-driven restrictions. The symbolic behaviors are subtle but consistent. A cyclist wearing a helmet not as an act of caution but as unquestioned cultural routine. Communities closing ranks quickly when natural hazards arise. Coastal towns instinctively treating beach safety as a shared duty rather than a personal choice. These traits gradually reshape perceptions for many Americans. Over time, the contrast highlights how cultural mindsets influence risk, responsibility, and community cohesion. The normalization of trust creates a shift in emotional experience. Stress softens in places where collective expectations reduce the need for constant alertness. People begin to recognize how an environment built around mutual care can alter the rhythm of daily life, guiding choices and redefining what feels secure. In the end, the shock of Australian safety reveals something larger about cultural values. It illustrates how societies craft their own emotional landscapes, some built around vigilance, others around trust. The contrast invites a quieter reflection on how safety is not only a system of rules but a shared cultural belief, shaped by how people choose to move, behave, and look after one another. The rhythm of these observations becomes clearer as patterns repeat across different regions of the country, from quiet inland towns to densely populated coastal suburbs. What initially seems like a relaxed approach to danger gradually reveals its structure. Australians often navigate daily life with a calm assurance shaped not by indifference, but by systems designed to keep risk predictable. Beaches, for example, are lined with watchful lifeguards, detailed signage, and long-established rules. Yet the atmosphere remains peaceful rather than strict, creating a balance where people feel both free and protected. For many Americans, this harmony between regulation and ease forms one of the most unexpected cultural impressions. In public transport, the same balance appears. Trains and trams operate with minimal visible policing, yet stations feel orderly. Commuters respect queues, give space, and rarely create pressure in crowded moments. This collective self-management stands out, especially for those used to environments where authority is more visibly present. The absence of constant precautionary announcements or enforcement creates a quieter emotional experience, suggesting a society that relies more on shared norms than on continuous oversight. Even the way Australians engage with natural hazards carries its own cultural signature. Bushfire warnings, intense sun exposure, or dangerous surf conditions are treated with a matter-of-fact respect. The culture does not dramatize risk, yet it never downplays it. Instead, the response is practical and communal. Neighborhoods prepare together, families follow established routines, and public messaging communicates risk clearly without invoking fear. This creates a collective confidence that can feel unusual for Americans accustomed to more polarized attitudes towards safety. Daily routines further reveal symbolic behaviors that represent deeper cultural values. Workers in high-risk industries follow safety protocols with near unquestioning consistency, reflecting a national emphasis on workplace protection. Cyclists, hikers, and swimmers often approach outdoor activities with a similar sense of responsibility. Even social nights out reflect this mindset. Designated driver systems, controlled pub environments, and citywide initiatives to limit alcohol-related harm all indicate a belief that safety is a shared concern rather than a personal burden. Over time, these small, repeated experiences begin to change how safety is perceived. The lack of urgency in the environment allows many Americans to recognize how a socially cohesive mindset reduces everyday friction. The quiet predictability of interactions, whether crossing a street or navigating a crowded event, shapes an emotional landscape where people feel held by the collective rather than left to manage risk alone. This realization often becomes one of the most enduring impressions of life in Australia, marking a distinct shift in how safety itself is understood. As these cultural layers continue to unfold, the broader effect becomes increasingly evident. Many Americans find that the Australian approach subtly rewires expectations about community and personal responsibility. In neighbourhoods where trust forms the baseline, routines adjust almost without notice. Locks remain, rules exist, and dangers are acknowledged, yet the emotional tone is calmer. The society's confidence in shared norms reduces the mental load carried through daily life. Safety becomes less about readiness for conflict and more about confidence in the surrounding social fabric. The transformation is most visible in how people interpret risk. When the prevailing belief is that others are generally considerate, interactions soften. Pedestrians step onto crosswalks with certainty because drivers reliably yield. Children navigate school routes on foot or bicycle without the constant sense of vulnerability common elsewhere. Even late-night streets feel less threatening, not because risk is absent, but because communities maintain unspoken agreements about behavior and boundaries. This cooperative climate creates an environment where safety feels mutual rather than individual. Workplaces mirror this psychological shift. The rigorous safety standards, often perceived as excessive by newcomers, create cultures where caution is normalized, not questioned. Instead of slowing productivity, these habits build a stable rhythm that reduces stress over time. Australians tend to treat regulations as part of the social contract, an understanding that minimizing harm benefits everyone. For many Americans, witnessing this collective acceptance becomes a revelation about the role shared values can play in shaping a safer society. Eventually, the contrast prompts a quiet reflection. The shock of Australian safety is not rooted in the absence of danger, but in the presence of trust in systems, trust in norms, and trust in one another. It highlights how cultures differ not only in how they respond to risk, but in how they imagine it. Some societies build security through vigilance. Others build it through cohesion. In Australia, that cohesion becomes the steady pulse of everyday life, offering a glimpse of how deeply cultural expectations can influence the feeling of safety itself.